Hello, everybody. We're very pleased to be able to host this particular webinar. I know there's a lot of interest from various people about work opportunities in the Middle East. Some people have just returned. Some people are still away. Some people report that it's been a marvelous experience, and others report that it's been a complete and utter disaster for them. And so I thought what we would do is get together a couple of people that have been working in that region and just share their inputs and provide you with an opportunity to ask questions. And since ladies first, Belinda, I know you just joined us. Having been the queen of the events industry in Durban for so many years, you've now relocated. I see Sharif's applauding while you've now kind of relocated and you're living full time in Dubai. Maybe you could just start and talk a little bit about the different experiences. What's it like working in a different country? In terms of dress, in terms of money, in terms of living, in terms of transport, in terms of relationships, in terms of bars. Lots of bars in Dubai, but yeah, just talk a little bit about what it's like working in a different country. Is it all that it's made out to be?
Okay, so we've just got an alarm going off in our building, and I'm going to have to take my laptop with me. And can we come back to me? It's terrible. I am so sorry. I literally have to go outside for 5 minutes. I will take you with me though. But just a short thing is working here has been an eye opener. There are a lot of things that you've had to get used to. There's a lot of different ways of doing things that are completely different to how we do them in South Africa, not to mention just job descriptions, for one. But I would humbly request if I can do mine a bit later, having just been evicted from my office.
So Kurt, you're in Jeddah at the moment. Why don't you jump in? I think perhaps you've spent maybe not more yes, I think perhaps more time than any of the others working in the Middle East over the last few years. So why don't you jump in and address some of those issues? Is the grass greener?
When you look at your bank account, definitely, but the main problem is you need to be very diplomatic, is the correct word I can say, about your religious views, what you say, how you speak to people. When you're with your crew and your company that you're working with, things are a little bit relaxed and you can be yourself. But when you're in meetings and formal Zoom meetings and stuff like that, you need to respect the command, and it's basically ultimate power. So somebody can walk in and change what you've been working on for months and say you've got 3 days to fix it or change it or move it or whatever. So you basically put your head down, say, yes, sir, thank you, sir, very much, sir, we'll do what we can, and you get it done. But it's a much bigger world than in South Africa, number one. The South African staff and crew that I've worked with that have been involved in the productions with me have been, ultimately, they can stand their own in the world. You're dealing with Germans, Americans, British people, French people, Russians, all over the world, and the South Africans can stand their own. I think the biggest plus we have is that not only are we helpful, we get involved in stuff we shouldn't, which helps the client, but can also get you into trouble. So it's a two-edged sword. But also we're cheap in terms of what we will work for, and that's where we get abused. So you need to know what people are getting paid for what. Like I said in my notes that I made, learn, invest in yourself. You know, having a cherry picker license, a forklift license, being able to draw, learn to draw, get SketchUp, start. You know, even just have the free viewers of AutoSketch and Vectorworks and VisiWig, so that if someone sends you a drawing, you can open it and have a look at it and say, right, this is fine, we can deal with this, or no, we can't deal with that, we don't have this equipment, but we can offer that, you know. And then people will see that you are helpful and you know what you're talking about. And the other big thing that I said is that you don't really want to be working for the technical companies. You want to be their client. That's kind of where I position myself. And then you get paid for your knowledge and what your know-how. You must understand you've got a client with lots of money. They want to do an event. And I did a search on Saudi Arabia. I think it was 178 events this year. So there's many, many production companies who might be politically in a position to do the event, but they have no knowledge. So then they will bring in a company like Blink or many other production companies and say, guys, please put on this event. And then Blink will go to the market and say, okay, we need a core team, we need a technical team to advise us on what's been done. Then they bring in the artistic people, the show people, and then we have to then find the suppliers and do the procurement and do all the anti-corruption stuff and all that. So we kind of are an advisory type role, which to me is a much better position to be than actually the guy rigging the lights, because you're going to be there with Pakistanis and Indians and Bangladeshis, and these guys work. Their biggest problem is they don't speak English. So as a South African, you're coming in as a technician, you can speak English. So you're already going to be in a better position to communicate with the client, number one, and also the people in charge. When I deal with some of the suppliers, if it's not PRG, it's Media Pro, whatever, I have a guy that just talks to the crew because I can't talk to the crew. And give them a drawing, fine. Anybody in the world, you give them a drawing, standard practice, world best practice, whatever you're doing, the drawing will speak for itself. The guys will install it, safety, all that stuff. We know what we're doing. But then it's the communication. Oh, can we change this? This needs to be changed. Oh, we need to create an access here. This is a security issue because the prince's bodyguard said this can't be here, and that we need to move it. So that's where the South Africans really have a level up on everybody else. The events range from soccer races, horse racing, camel racing, to car racing in the sand. I mean, the events are wide, and we're not even talking about the corporate market. The corporate market is kind of dealt with the locals, much smaller scale stuff, but they're learning. Once you're here, you start to meet suppliers, and then you say, like, do you know some people? We're looking for a head technician or a rigger or whatever, and then I just show them the website in South Africa. There's thousands of technicians. You can use this pool. But you're coming over here sometimes a year at a time, 3 months, 6 months, whatever your contract is, and it's hard. You've got to. The best way to explain it to me is that when you're putting in your application for your visa and you get your phone and you need to do the health application and all that stuff, and it says dungeon worker. And I'm like, this is probably the best way to explain what we do. So you go from your dungeon to your work, and you go back to your dungeon, and that's it. And while you're here, you get fed, you get looked after, but you basically here to work. Playtime is something, you might get one day off on a Friday or whatever, but there's not much to do. And so you've got to kind of make groups and work with people that you get to know on site, and then you move to the next production, you learn and meet more people, and you slowly you get to know a lot of people. And word of mouth is probably the best way I get around and get jobs. Sure, we have agents that send us stuff. Do you want to do this job? We want to do that job. So I think if you want to come out, start, get something, learn, take it, put it on your CV, move on. And go, and every time, I promise you, if you survive the baptism by fire, you will move up the food chain very fast. If you don't survive, then you'll come back home. But I mean, I'm lucky. I started in Africa for 30 years. So I mean, being in Saudi Arabia is actually a pleasure, but you're still going to have some challenges. So I'm not saying it's all going to be hunky-dory and everything's going to be fantastic. I'm sure you can eventually get some decent money involved, but you've got to start somewhere, and I think that's where people are disillusioned, and they come from South Africa and they go like, oh, I want 10 grand a day or whatever. You're not going to get that off the bat. You're going to have to start at the 1,200, 2,000 rand, more or less what you're going to get at home. But then you're getting fed. You've got accommodation, you've got transport, so you actually can take 90% of that money you can bring home. And that's the difference between being there and being here. So, but while you're in South Africa, it's cheap to do stuff. It's cheap to get your licenses, your um, cherry picker, telehandler, all that stuff. I mean, the truck driver, you know, you arrive here and somebody goes, oh, I need to offload a truck, but we don't have a telehandler operator because it's Friday. And you go, well, I can do that. You know, that's going to be a big plus on your next appointment when you go to the next job. Someone said, hey, this guy's got some skills, you know, and then that's where you're going to be much better off than the guys that are coming in from the suppliers who they're just a number and they're part of a machine. I mean, I'm getting 130, 150 visa applications for my suppliers for F1. I'm like, why do you need so many crew? Oh no, we don't know who's coming, so we're just going to get visas for everyone. I said, this costs money, you know, for the client. Give me your suppliers, what exactly who's coming, and then we'll get their visas. But you know, you're dealing with hundreds of staff, and every day is a different project, a different area, and you're just managing that stuff. But when you see a South African guy in the crew, you know, I mean now with the Qatar World Cup, I think out of 50 crew there were over 12 South Africans in the audio department, in the rigging department, in the lighting department. All the programmers on MA were all South Africans. You know, it's actually amazing to see. And then the laser guy arrives and there's a big Zulu on a cherry picker. I'm like, where are you from? No, I'm from Durban. You know, I've never met the guy, but he's working for a laser company in Qatar. So it's amazing to see. And the South Africans really have a great something great to offer the industry, and then from there you can move to Europe and to London or America, and then you can use this as a stepping stone. But in the meantime, you know, use what you can and go forward from there. You know, but that's kind of what I have to say.
Yeah, so let's just hit the pause button there, and I'm guessing that Belinda is away from the siren that was going off, escaped from the fire alarm. So one of the things that Kurt said was that you know, oftentimes South Africans have unrealistic expectations about how much money they're going to earn. So is that the case? You know, I don't think that there's any doubt that event techs get underpaid in South Africa, but do they have this grand vision that they're going to start earning huge amounts of? The nodding says it all. Maybe you can just pick that up.
So I have moved into, like Kurt said, I first worked at Expo, and I worked in technical, which is obviously where I come from. And when I was looking for a full-time job, I looked around and saw what is available. And being the end of Expo, there were just so many people looking for full-time jobs. And Neumann and Müller were looking for a HOD of crew. Having worked with crew my entire life, I thought, okay, well, let me start there. When I came for the interview, they said, no, we don't know you. We've never met you. We looked at your references are fine. So you'll have to be a crew manager, which was a hell of a step down. But I thought to myself, you know what? I've got nothing to go back to currently, so let me do it. Within 4 months, I've been promoted to HOD of crew for Middle East and Africa, as well as our Germany SI projects. However, part and parcel of my job is obviously to get crew for projects. Now, we do projects in Europe, in Africa, and in Saudi, obviously, in Qatar and Dubai. The biggest issue I have is the expectation of the South African crew, because I am South African. I am looking to actively put our technicians on these jobs because they're good. You know, make no mistake, they're good, they're easy to work with. But the problem I'm having is on rates, the expectations of what the company has to provide. You know, from they expecting full accommodation, full per diems, catering, and then rates. For instance, I was looking desperately for a video guy, mainly LED and some projection. I got a number of CVs in from all around the world, and one of the guys who had been shortlisted was a South African. and I was trying to push this guy as much as possible, had final interviews. Then he, the week before, turned around and said to me, no, I can't do it. I'm looking for a base salary of 40,000 dirhams a month. And that's excluding accommodation, that's excluding transport, that's excluding per diems. And I was like, dude, that's not where it is, you know. We're offering half that, you know, which is still really good considering he would be getting full catering, full board and transport. And he kind of just said, no, look, it's not worth my while, and off he went. So it's not unique though. So as much as I am trying to get South Africans in, there is this weird misunderstanding of what rates are given, you know. I've been trying, that's why I put that little thing together and sent it to the rest of you to have a look at. You know, it's the same with the biggest misconception here. And I'm talking on a rental company point of view, not a production company point of view, is project managers. The assumption is that project managers earn massive salaries, but actually they don't. They earn an average salary of between 20 and 30 for project managers. I'm not talking about senior project managers. I'm not talking about specialists. You know, specialists are on their own. We have quite a lot of issues with it. So at the moment, you know, I don't do the recruiting. It goes through our recruitment person here, Iman. And they literally look at the CVs and they ask you what salary you want. As soon as you are out of the bracket, you get pushed aside. It's not a thing of, there are so many technicians looking for positions that they're not going back to them, you know. And in that way, a lot of people are missing out.
If I could jump in there, Kevin.
Yep, go for it, Dave.
So just, I think it's a good point if I could jump in, having worked, you know, obviously I did my first project now in Saudi for the Festival of Lights, and then obviously I've done quite a bit of work here in the UK, and I've had this discussion with Dave Tudor, and I think me and you, Kevin, had a bit of a discussion as well when it came to rates, and to give people some example from my point of view as a first timer coming into Saudi, and you know, obviously first thing you go is like, whoa, the money's good, all right. And obviously I came in as a technical manager, and you know, obviously everything, you know, sort of paid for, all that sort of type of thing. But afterwards, let's call it afterwards, yes, the money, I'm not going to lie, the pay was decent. But when I sat down and I worked it out, I actually, compared to having worked in the UK, I got paid let's just call it the average UK technical rate. That's what it worked out to. And as Kurt alluded, you know, when someone is in the UK, in Saudi or whatever, you work. You don't do anything but work. We worked, if we had to work 7 days a week, 16-hour days, that's what we did. That's what the job required, and that's what we did. We just worked, and as Kurt alluded, you go back to your dungeon, hopefully a good one, and you have breakfast, or lunch becomes breakfast, or dinner becomes breakfast, or whatever, and you go and sleep, and you get up and you carry on working. Whereas, you know, in maybe some other projects, you'll get your 2 days off or whatever. And then, but what I'm trying to say is, you end up if you take the amount of money you get and you work it back, sometimes you'll be, oh, well, I'm getting paid well. And other times you'll be like, gee, but I'm actually getting paid I'm not getting paid enough for the amount of hours you might be putting in. You can't never calculate hours because you'd never know till you're on the job, but the per day. And yeah, you know, I know from working a lot we had a lot of UK people that were on our project, and some of them were moaning terribly about the rates. and I couldn't really understand it until I did that calculation and I worked it back, because we weren't working on how many normal working days in a month, 24, 26 or whatever it is. When you're working, you're actually working 30 odd days in that month. You out in the middle of, you're on a project somewhere else. So you calculate it like that, it actually works out. You might, in my case, or in some cases, the guys are as low as 150 pounds a day, which is a very low rate for in the UK standards, if that makes sense. So I think it also depends where you come from. I know obviously most of the people here are all South African, but I think knowing what the different industry rates are from around the world does help a little bit. It helps to gauge yourself, I think. So in other words, if I get called for a project for Saudi now, and I think, oh, that rate looks a little bit low, I'm gonna calculate it back to the UK rate. I'm not gonna calculate it back to the South African rate, because the exchange rate throws it out completely. You know what
Yes.
I mean? And I can then base myself in going, well, am I prepared to work for 150 pounds a day or 120 pounds a day? And the answer would be no, because it's like slave labor, But if you're starting getting here like 200 pounds a day, 250 pounds a day, now we're into the UK standard rate. And if I think about the company that I was recruited and employed through, I was done through a British-based company. So I think, and that company was TPE, and I think obviously being a UK-based company, they would then naturally work on a UK-based rate. I don't know about other companies, maybe Dubai-based companies and stuff. They would be working on a slightly lower rate, from what I've seen. From when I have had interviews and stuff, they've sort of offered slightly less,
Yep. Sorry, before we go on to the next speaker, Trey Trevor has joined us as a panelist, but his camera's not on. So Trevor, if you just want to, I don't know how much of what we've been talking about you've heard. Are you able to turn your camera on?
I'm just looking to turn it on, just having difficulties, but I'll work through it along the way. But if everyone can hear me, I think I can add more to that.
Yeah, fine. So we can hear you. So if you turn your camera on, that would be great. If not, please go ahead.
Okay, so I'm definitely with what David is saying. There is a lot of work coming around, and in terms of rates, I believe with most of us, let's say, especially for me, I came into the industry during COVID, and it was like when I started getting Middle East jobs, and it was during a very, very rough patch where I didn't have much information in terms of rates and everything. And my first job was with Newman and Muller. So with most of us technicians, we basically have no idea what's happening on the other side. So we only have this notion of there is a lot of money to be made and there is a lot of work in the Middle East. But in terms of rates, most of us, we don't know. That's why most people tend to go for unrealistic rates. Because if, let's say, for example, someone tells you like, okay, you're going to get something like 1,000 dirhams or 1,000 riyals a day. And then people would literally look at it and say, nah, that is too little. But how do you get to that point? Where do you stand as a technician? Are you a technician? Are you an engineer? Or you basically like the project manager? So we need to have basis whereby we as technicians, first of all, we need to share more information and shed light on how these rates go, especially let's say if we have people that are in production and we have people that are usually doing the hiring stuff. So in most cases, the problems that I've noticed, like some companies have got double standard. They've got like rates for the European guys, if let's say you have an European technician, and they've got rates for an African guy, basically South African. And we have some of our South African guys who are agents, who basically taking advantage of the fact that they know there are some guys who haven't seen the other side, so they take advantage and try bring them in on cheap labor, of which that also comes back to bite us, because you bringing in some of the guys that we're trying to uplift, and you say we as South Africans, we need to have a certain standard in terms of technical production, because we know we have a reputation and we are that good. So if you're bringing good guys and bringing them a raw deal, that's basically something that brings us back at the end of the day. So for me, I would say we need to share more information in terms of rates, as also us empowering ourselves in terms of like what Kurt said, you need to learn more, you need to be connected more, talk to people and market yourself so that you can be multi-skilled. Sometimes they might need a lighting tech or a lighting operator, but you find that most of the lighting work is going to be done for a certain period and then it stops and then you need to jump on other things. So that also makes it logical for you to be able to charge a certain rate with a little bit of extra because you offer more than just lighting side aspects of things. So from me, from my experience, and I've been fortunate enough that at a young age, I've been places, but it was due to being able to talk and ask questions from those that have been there before me. And some of us are really, really reluctant and not willing to ask and know. Hence, like what Belinda said, someone comes in and asks a ridiculous amount of pay. Sometimes it looks ridiculous, but that's because you are not well informed. You've listened to people that have literally told you something which is not as it is, or you're not looking at the specifics or didn't do much research. So in terms of us, I feel like we need to do more in terms of sharing information and just giving each other rough ideas of, okay, guys, this is where we are, and this is what probably companies are going to be able to offer you if you negotiate due to your skills, experience, and what you've done. You might be able to get to this, and then you negotiate in a more reasonable bracket rather than overshooting yourself and shooting yourself in the foot.
Okay, thank you. Now,
if I could jump in, sorry, I just want to jump in one point there. I noticed something that was a little discussion on one of the UK freelance groups that I'm on Facebook, and there was a guy talking about personal terms and conditions, and it was quite interesting because it's something that I've never really thought about, and basically, in short, what he was doing as an international touring condition was rewriting his own terms and conditions in terms of it's a baseline, and I thought that was actually quite a good idea. I mean, you can't always put it. I mean, when you can't have your own contract because you sign another company's contract through a recruitment company or whatever. But it was sitting back and just going, okay, what is, especially with these type of international gigs and stuff, is what are my personal terms and conditions, is what are my minimums, what am I minimum working for, what am I doing that, do I want PDs, can I survive it? And again, just doing your research. If you haven't done a gig over there already, doing your research, writing some basic terms and conditions, so when you have these conversations with anybody, you can, or when the offer does come through, you can just sit and tick a box. And then if there's a box that's not being ticked for whatever reason, you can then bring that subject matter up without it being too contentious, if that makes sense. But so I thought that was actually quite a really good idea. It's just having a personal terms and conditions. I mean, we all, if you freelance, you have to invoice as a freelancer and stuff like that. You can include it in some way or form. Something that I haven't really looked at, but I just thought it was a really good idea. Just so you know where you stand, and then you can work within that scale. And if someone comes and offers you something that's out better than what you already really done some deep thought into, then you just go for it. You don't have to question anything.
Riaan, I know you've done quite a few jobs in the Middle East, particularly starting during COVID. And as Belinda said, you moved up there at a time when there was simply no work going your way in South Africa. I'm guessing you're back in South Africa at the moment, but only because there's a rugby picture on the wall behind you. So are you back in South Africa? What can you add to this conversation?
Just a correction there. I went for the first time actually in October, November last year. The previous times that I had job secured, I was stopped by COVID strains and variants and so forth. Okay. So I would like to look at this thing sort of during COVID versus now. So during COVID, I mean, things were desperate. I mean, anybody from a basic technician to a project manager or owner of a business would literally jump on any opportunity. Whatever they offered, if they offered me 10,000 Rand, I would have been gone, you know, because it was that bad.
Yep.
Now, when you're desperate, your decision-making processes don't work so well because you're seeing what's in front of you and not what the future might hold. And I think if we're speaking to guys that still want to go, we need to tell them that the lessons have been learned by other people that have gone before you, and this forum is for you to make a qualified decision of how you're going to approach going there. Now, for me, I went to go and work on this little project called Soundstorm in Saudi, and it's the craziest gig I've ever been on. I mean, it is just ridiculous, you know. But speaking of our South Africans, I mean, there were so many of them there. I mean, I think I lost count at 30. And the guys work hard. They show everybody else how hard they can work. But there was some rumblings going on that I was watching about these guys, and there was this perceived thing about their value versus the hours they would do. And these guys, I mean, on that gig, there was no days off. 7 days a week, 18 hours a day. And even I took strain. I'm an old bully now, so it was hard. So, you know, when you need to look at desperation versus opportunity. So if you want to go there, I think there's two things that I would like to say. Is if you go, what is your goal? Is your goal to go and work there and come back? Or are you going to go there and try and find a job? Because those two things are pretty separate entities in my mind. Because if you're going to go there just to work and earn some money and come back and bring your money to South Africa, that's one thing. If you're going to go there and stay, and the cost of living there, that's a totally different conversation. The cost of living in those countries are ridiculous. I mean, it's really, and that's why everybody's asking for so much money, because they want to think that they, you know, that's how they're going to cover things. But I must say the companies are fair in the Middle East in terms of if you ask for a certain salary, and then they take care of everything, your food, your visa, your flights, So that's a nice thing to know, that if you get in there, they're going to do that. But if you're going to go there, you need to go there and meet people. What Kurt said is about word of mouth relationships, and you know, it's also about getting a job that you might be a junior now, where you were senior in South Africa. Take that job and show them what you. They see very quickly who are the guys that know their stuff, and that are hard workers. And unfortunately, what you need to understand is you're going to a new country, it's sort of starting over, right? Nobody knows you, except if there's a Kurt there or a Belinda there. Nobody knows you. You need to prove yourself. And if you go there and you think, oh, because I'm a South African and I know what I'm doing, you'll very quickly fall. Now, the last thing I want to say is, Belinda gave some very, very good information there, is that a lot of companies seem to not sign contracts, or guys don't sign proper contracts. It is a 1-2 pager thing, and there's a lot of stuff that's left out there. They tell you they'll pay for your visa, they tell you they'll pay for your flight, and you take it on face value, they tell you they'll pay for your hotel, etc., etc. If it's not in writing, guys, it ain't happening if they decide not to do it because you've signed the contract.
Yes.
So that for me is very, very important, that we have guys that's got the knowledge to go, that's went there, that learned all the lessons. Please don't sign something if everything they promised you is not on that document, because when you get there, you have no power.
It's too late.
That's my 10 cents pricey for you.
So, Belinda, very quickly, if you can comment on that, what you do, if you don't mind. Sharif, I'm going to kick over to you after Belinda, and then Clint Seary's been doing a lot of work in the Middle East. He's just sent me a note saying that he'd like to join in the conversation as well. So I'm going to ask Clint to come in after Sharif. So let's just go with Belinda.
Just further to that, with regards to the contracts, getting them signed. That should be no problem from a company's point of view if they're serious. But secondly, please guys, don't pay random people money for getting you jobs. You know, I have heard the most horrendous stories about having to pay people 10% of your salary, 15% of your salary, or 20% of your salary, and they not just because they got you an interview or they got you a job. I don't even know how to say it. It is so wrong, and it's not legal in the UAE either, unless it's a registered broker. That's all I've got to say.
It's fine. And in fact, one of the questions that Achim Ilunga asked was, how do we get these opportunities in the Middle East? And I think, you know, part of the answer is go through legitimate channels. I know this is one question that Sharif was going to address. So Sharif, Achim's question, how do we get these opportunities in the Middle East? Is that Clinton? Okay.
Yeah, that's Clint.
Okay. So Sharif, if you want to jump in first.
Sorry, I'm just in a meeting.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, guys. I think obviously by virtue of this webinar, to let everybody know what it's like, and I think everybody around this table has given their their opinions based on experience. And I will say there is no such thing as the grass greener on the other side. It's what you make and how you do it. It's a fact of life. And the one thing that we need to realize, and it's like Trey has definitely said, we need to educate ourselves, we need to communicate so that everybody knows what we're doing. Because the last thing we want to do is price ourselves out of the market and make South Africans look bad in the Middle East because we are deemed as charging a amount. So we need to be cognizant of that. And it's like Riaan said, you need to prove yourself first before you can do anything else. The one thing that is coming through now, which will segue into how do you get yourself known in the Middle East, the one is that a lot of the companies are asking for your CVs. A lot of companies are asking for your credentials, and obviously having qualifications, or in this case, and I'm going to speak Sakya, having a professional designation gives you an upper hand in everything that you want to do anywhere in the world. For you to say I'm the best sound engineer in the country is one thing, and you may just be the best sound engineer in the country, but without the proper paperwork behind you, it means diddly squat in the Middle East. One of the major ways of getting into the Middle East is obviously through the recruitment agencies and the reputable ones. And there are a few reputable ones that you can investigate and look at. And the best way to approach one of these recruitment agencies would be through LinkedIn. LinkedIn is probably going to be your best platform to engage with a recruitment agency. They will also send you notifications. We're looking for a CAD drawer, a Vectorworks, a technical, or whatever the case may be. So that would be the route to go. And again, if you regard yourself as a professional, this is the only route to go. Yes, word of mouth is going to carry. Kurt is going to guide because he knows you. Riaan, Belinda, all of us will guide you and recommend you. But you need to be able to do things on your own. First time out, you are not going to make the money you think you're going to make. You need to prove yourself. And thereafter, you will make money. It may not be as much as you thought, 40,000, 50,000, but you will make good money compared to you working in South Africa. Let's face it, guys, COVID killed all of us in our industry. And here we are picking up the pieces, and now we've got an opportunity to work in the Middle East. There is that opportunity, take it, but do it the right way. Even post-COVID, our industry is still struggling. So again, don't think you can go to the Middle East and ask an arm and a leg. Firstly, you're shooting South Africa down, and the next South African will be frowned upon to say, no, I don't want a South African because they charge too much. Secondly, you have the opportunity to grow South Africa and our expertise and our skill. And the biggest thing we've got an advantage of over everybody is, like Kurt says, we can speak English. And the fact that you can speak English speaks volumes. Now, majority of people around this table are speaking because from a point of view where they got by a technical company or an events house, which is probably 9 times out of 10 UK based or European based to do the job. I was in a position where I was booked by a production house locally in Saudi Arabia. So that puts a different spin on what you can and cannot do. And I obviously can only speak for Saudi Arabia. I cannot speak for the Emirates. I'm pretty sure between Kurt and Belinda, they can there. But working with a group of eclectic people that also worked on the expo, that came from Russia, they came from Brazil and Argentina, they gave all their experiences. Now, guys, it's exactly what Kurt said. Don't think you're South African and you can come there and show all and be all, because that's not the case. For all intents and purposes, Saudi Arabia, for example, is only 5 years old. Up to 5 years ago, females couldn't even drive cars in that country. Today, things are changing under the conference. Many opportunities there with the new Line City, with the new Neon City, with this Middle Beast Sandstorm that Riyadh was part of. They are currently looking desperately for skilled, whether it be technicians or whether it be project managers and what have you, and they're asking all the right credentials. Now, if you do your paperwork in advance, like Rian has said, as did I made sure I had a decent hotel. I made sure I had breakfast. I made sure I had meals 3 times a day. I made sure my laundry was done, because all of that adds up, guys. And let me tell you how I learned that from David Leverington and Dave Tudor. If I did not engage with them and get the feedback from them, I would never have known these things. Not completely, I would have, but the guys guided me. So like Trey said, communication is key. As far as fees are concerned, yeah, you're going to earn 20,000 dirhams or 20,000 riyals compared to being in South Africa right now. I don't care who you are. That is great money, and it is good money. And then you can build yourself up from there with what you want to do. You cannot compare yourself to a European or a British person unless you are professionally qualified or designated, like David Leverington. For you to go and ask for that 200 or 250 pounds per day, I'm sorry, you're not entitled to it as much as you think you are. You are not. But that's the negative. But the positive is there is possibilities beyond possibilities. For the next 10 years, the Middle East is the go-to place, whether it be 1 month stint, 3 month stint, 6 month stint, or permanent like Belinda and Kurt. It will be a success for you. As long as your mindset is, the people in the Middle East have a different outlook on life, especially when it comes to religion, especially when it comes to their way of life. If you're respectful of that and mindful of that, you will go a long, long way in the Middle East and being a success in your craft and with what you do. Kevin?
Oh, Sharif. So I see Kurt's got his hand up. Actually, like Belinda and Kurt and several others, I know Andre de Toy, now based full-time in Dubai with Eclipse, Encore rather. I know, yeah, many other South Africans based full-time in Dubai, and was come in and join us. Kurt, you had your hand up so quickly, and then we'll link over to Clinton.
Yes, I just want to say something about I call it your personal tech rider. That's something I've been thinking about, because I've had a few times where things were promised and nothing happened. So that's what David was mentioning. But to get back to LinkedIn, if anybody wants to link with me on LinkedIn, if I see anything juicy, I'll always post. So if you go to my Kurt du Preez on LinkedIn, you'll see every day I put stuff up. And like I said, there was 178 events planned for this next 12 months. So if I see something juicy, I will link it there. There's the same guys coming up that I can say they looked after us. They were giving good, decent rates. And just to give people an idea, a truck driver gets 150 euros in Europe. So just to put that in perspective as well.
Clinton, your microphone is muted at the moment.
Yeah, no, I've just turned it back on.
Yep.
So I just, from my experience, obviously I came to Dubai in May of 21, and at that point we had kind of lost everything in South Africa. I had a event design company and a production company supporting production consulting company. So we pretty much lost everything in the COVID battle, but I made a decision, and at that point had to sell stuff out of my garage just to afford a ticket and get on a plane and come to Dubai. And I took a chance. I sold everything. I hadn't signed my contract. I went to Namibia for 2 weeks and I ended up in Dubai, and my family followed me with our 2 cats. So my wife and I live in Dubai now. We have 2 kids in school. We have 2 cats here. We've got a rescue dog and a rescue cat that we're just looking after. So we kind of settled into this whole thing. But the reality here is it's tough. It's not cheap. You know, our school fees a year are insane. You know, medical, etc. There are things that if you are moving to this country or moving to this region, everything is upfront. So we pay for medical upfront. We pay for insurance for our car upfront for a full year. We pay for school fees. We pay, everything is upfront. A rental upfront. There's no getting around it. The country is based on people moving in and deciding that they're going to run up these massive credit card bills and then jump on a plane and leave. It's a very strict country. It's a very well-run country. So from that perspective, yes, as a family, we feel safe. My kids go to a safe school. They play in a safe community. Those things are really a bonus if you are looking to move into this region. But from a moving here, I did a lot of research. I phoned people, I spoke to people. I tried to understand what those, you know, what those aspects were. What is the going rate? Expo had a really good salary scheme. They didn't look after your accommodation. They didn't look after your transport. They didn't look after your food. We didn't get meals. And some people, our contractors like Norman and Muller and CT and all those were given meals a day by their companies, but as Expo staff, we got nothing. So our salary package was pretty decent, and I think we took a big knock in the beginning. Coming here, we spent a lot of rands to move the family and pay for those initial startup costs to get going. So that's just that part of it. Then obviously after Expo, trying to find work, like Belinda said, everyone was looking. You know, there are thousands of posts every day on LinkedIn about production managers and event production managers and technical directors and stuff. But if you look at the applications, in 16 hours, there's 1,000 applicants, you know, after Expo. People are just applying for everything. So we decided to do the freelance route. Belinda obviously chose a permanent. Well, good luck on good on you, Belinda. But freelance is different. You know, we had to pay for our own visa, which you know, for a 2-year visa is like 80,000 Rand, like, you know, 90,000 Rand. I can't even remember what we paid. We still have to pay the kids' school fees, etc., etc. So being freelance is a lot more of a struggle here. I luckily got onto a project also with Middle Beast in Saudi with production glue for the XB conference, which took part just before Soundstorm. And yes, we worked with Media Pro. They had a lot of South African crew, and they worked really hard. Their pay is not great, but they do get accommodation. They do get fed. They do get looked after in some sense. I'm not certain of their salaries, but they take contracts, so they'll get contracted for 6 months and work on 6 or 7 or 8 different shows through that period. So there are those kind of opportunities where you do sign a 6-month contract and you may work on a few projects for a technical company. They also look after you. So, you know, there's PRGs, Media Pro, CT, Neumann and Muller. There's a bunch of them out there. And I do say that you need to keep an eye on LinkedIn. I know Neumann and Muller have like a job page. Belinda can correct me, but you know, they actively look, and you need to be with the right agents or be on the right platforms to find the work. I constantly look on LinkedIn. I do have connections from previously working on the Winter Olympics in Sochi and with a company called BWS. So I do get contacted to go, are you available, directly, versus with Event Lab, which is an agency here, THA, which is an agency here, Jam Events, which is an agency here. Make notes of those. They're good agencies. They have an app which you can log into, and they will tell you what jobs are coming up. They'll tell you the rate, you know, what qualifications you need, etc., etc. But also, I just want to point out a friend of mine, Sandile from South Africa. He ended up in Qatar working for a technical company, and was told that his package included money for his accommodation. When he got there, realized how much the accommodation actually cost, then had to renegotiate, and luckily they said they would pay half of his accommodation. So like Kurt and Belinda and everyone is saying, double check your contracts. Your contracts are important. Once you've signed that, literally don't break it. It's very important in this region that your contract is, it is your contract with the company, that, and it's theoretically with the government in some sense. If you break your contract, you're in big shit. Make sure you double check your contract, double check with people that live in the region or work in the region on what those kind of expectations are. I just want to say attitude is also very key. Like Kurt said earlier, your attitudes toward religion, your attitude towards people is you know, if you pull the bird like a middle finger at someone driving past in a car, you'll be locked up. There's no, if you even looks like you pointed your finger in that direction, you will be locked up. The region doesn't tolerate you know, swearing in front of you know, local Arabs and those kind of things is frowned upon. You know, be calm, enjoy yourself, make the most of it. Yes, it's expensive to live here. Yes, it's expensive to spend your money here. If you're being looked after, you can save money. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of really all I wanted to say. I think this is a good area. It's not easy. The work is amazing. The work is phenomenal. Well done, Kurt. I love your work,
Kevin,
mate.
Yeah.
Kevin, I just wanted to jump on something.
Let's try.
Yes. Clint actually said something that caught my attention, which I also went through in my last contract. And also I heard from other guys who were going to. Kurt, you have a lot of experience in the industry and you've been in and out with different companies. And Belinda, you also permanently employed to a company. So I think you guys might be able to shed some light on this. This is not only gonna basically help me, it's gonna help a lot of people. We have issues of companies going back on contracts, intimidation and everything. I had guys that came up to me during the last previous Qatar World Cup where they were crying about the contract they were offered. And hours were crazy. They were not as per contract. There was no PDs and everything. I tried to get proof. I promised Kevin, but the guys are literally scared to come up and because they want to be protected. So the question is, if a company promises you one thing, they go back on their contract, they don't deliver, they intimidate you, threaten to blacklist you, threaten to cut your visa, threaten to chuck you out, threaten to get you arrested. Mind you, in the Arab Emirates, we're in the Middle East, we don't know the laws. Some people were there for the first time. They've been told the country is like this. You know, we hear a lot of things about that side. And then some of the companies, they take advantage of this, they intimidate guys. So let's take, for instance, it's me, it's my first time contract. I've been promised so much, and then the company takes time to pay me, makes me work long hours, not as per contract, suddenly stops providing what you call lunch and food as always, and they then move me to a way less, like, bad accommodation from the one that I arrived in. How do I approach such? Who do I approach? Like, from those that have way more experience than us, what are the steps for me to be able to at least be able to fight a company in a better way that is not gonna ruin my reputation or get me in trouble with the authorities? How do we approach such? Because we've had many people who had gone through such during the World Cup. Yes, during the World Cup, we had a lot that came, and not everyone had a very good contract. Some were sold wishes, some were given the wrong end of the deal. Some got good deals, but it was not very, very good. So how do we protect our fellow techs? How do we protect ourselves? How do we handle such things from now in future and going forward?
So I think that Belinda is probably in a good position to answer that question. I just want to throw in some additional questions off the chat, and we can work towards wrapping up. So Wills Mahachi wrote, how do we prove ourselves if we don't get chances when companies only book those that they know? Sometimes, like in South Africa, we have DWR to thank because of their short industry courses, but mostly it is a disadvantage for someone in Cape Town because there are limited training opportunities available. So perhaps Sharif, you could, when you close up, just talk about standards training and the importance of industry certification. And then I was also hoping that we could talk very briefly about access to medical care. We all know Gary Sam, and very unfortunately passed away on his last gig in Saudi Arabia. And so I think it's important for everybody to understand what their obligations are in terms of healthcare, what they can do to protect themselves if they do fall ill whilst they're out of the country. Belinda, perhaps you can kick off there.
Okay, let me start with, look, you have to research who you're working for. There are a lot of companies, unfortunately, that treat their staff appallingly. And I also heard hectic stories over World Cup in Qatar. We put people in Qatar, we put people in Saudi, and obviously in Dubai. And one of the things here is, again, that contract is all important. So let's start with per diems. It's a weird thing in the Middle East. If you're a freelancer, sometimes you you invoice for your per diems, right? We do not, I'm talking about our company, we don't give per diems out in cash. But in saying that, we also provide meals. So we provide breakfast always at the hotel. We provide lunch at our workshop, believe it or not, one of the perks, yay. And also on site. Then if you have to provide yourself one meal, you charge 65 dirhams, right? This you would add as a freelancer to your invoice. If you were working for the company for a limited contract, you would then, we do an expense sheet and that the guys fill in weekly. But it all boils down to the company you're working for. Because if you are being intimidated, that's wrong. In Qatar and in Saudi, I don't know who you would take that up with, you know, at all. I don't know if Kurt perhaps could help with that. I think perhaps Kurt could now step in, because I think you have a little bit more experience of being on site and dealing with issues like this. Because as far as we're concerned, we provide accommodation, except for when I worked for Expo, when it was clearly stated that I had to find my own accommodation.
Yeah, in terms of legal side, I mean, your contract is legal document. So first thing would be find a lawyer that speaks English. A lot of the contracts are in duplicate in English and Arabic. So what you can do is find a local lawyer. Otherwise, the South African embassy. I mean, I'm not giving much hope there, but maybe you can, if you are now going to the embassy and you're getting governments involved, suddenly the employer might just think twice about stuffing you around. It's a, you know, if, like for me in Qatar, I actually left. I had a 6-month contract. I left on month 5 because the conditions or the way we were working was just not, I wasn't actually being utilized at all. And I went to my employer and said, what will be my penalties if I leave? And they said there will be no penalties. You can happily leave. So I left. So there was no negative in terms of that. But again, use an agent. Get proper person who knows what they're doing. They must have many references. Find people around. Like I said, get on LinkedIn. Send me a message saying, I'm working for these guys. Do you know them? I'll gladly tell you, listen, never heard of them. Be careful. And then make sure your contract's stable. At the end of the day, it might cost you some money to take them on. But I think once they realize you're not stuffing around and you're actually going to take them on, they might change their mind. You must remember, everybody's trying to make money, and if they can save costs by bullshitting their staff and not paying what they're supposed to pay. I mean, getting 65 dirhams is fine, but a pizza might cost you 90 for one meal. So at the end of the day, you need to consider your phone bill. I mean, a lot of people give you 200 dirhams or 200 SAR for a month for your phone. It's plenty enough, but if suddenly you are now supplying data for the whole office because they're not paying the internet for the office, then suddenly that becomes another problem. But you need to do your job, and you need to have access to the Dropbox and stuff, and there's huge files involved. So these are things that on the management side of that might not be relevant to a technician, but at the end of the day, they are reasonable. They have rates per job. This is the job, that's the rate. There's no dicking around, if I can put it that way. But there are people who take advantage, like in any place, in any country. So just make sure you do have something in writing and get some. We've got the TPSA, we've got all the company owners. You must have worked for some production companies. Ask around. Do you know these people? Have you seen them? And just Google what they do. Google the production. Most of the times they won't tell you what the production is. And only once you sign, and then you realize, oh, I'm on a cruise ship, or I'm doing something in a country like Eritrea and it's a war zone. These are things you need to consider, and just use common sense. I think that's my best advice.
I also want to just point out that, sorry, just quickly, Kevin, a lot of these kind of World Cup football, and I mean, when I worked in Sochi, for the Winter Olympics, we were told what accommodation was available by the Winter Olympic Committee. So we had no choice in moving up a star to a better accommodation. So I spent 2 months in my really bad accommodation in Sochi, and I believe the same thing happened in Qatar, where they started taking back rooms and giving them to people that were paying. Obviously that doesn't help the per diem thing, but again, I worked in Saudi for 2 months without per diems because they gave us meals every day and we had 2 pieces of laundry per day. So it's all kind of relevant. You kind of need to read that contract. That contract is important.
So Rian, you've got your hand up. I'm still hoping that somebody's going to address the issue of medical aid, and there's a question that's come through for Belinda from Andrea Altgeier. She says, I have a question for Belinda. Do female crew members face particular challenges in the Middle East? If so, what are they? So let's go with Rian, and then Belinda, if we can come over back to you.
Yeah, unfortunately, the hard facts are your contract. You need to sign a contract that stipulates everything that you expect and what they expect from you. That's your first point. So if somebody breaks that contract, I can't tell anybody that you can just go to a lawyer. I mean, it's not that simple. As much as the contract will be enforced if you break it, there must be a way for us to help some of the crew. I'm not sure what the answer is, so I'll defer that for our next conversation, and I'm going to look into that. In terms of the medical stuff, for Saudi, we got medical cover for about $5,000 US that was given to us by the company, but it was specific COVID. So it was related to, that's what Gary, when I spoke to Gary when he started getting really sick, I said, dude, you've got it, this thing, go to the hospital. So the medical thing, you can get travel insurance if you leave from South Africa and you buy your own ticket. But if you're going to go there and come back, stay on your own medical aid and let them know. And if there's extra cost involved, maybe try and cover you that side. Because again, like Clint said, if you want to get any coverage in those countries, you pay for how long you're going to be there. So if you're going to be there for 6 months, you would have to take a 6-month thing or a year thing out and pay up front, where all your money is gone and you work for free. Yeah, that's my 10 cents again.
Okay. We're eating into an hour plus. So Belinda, if you can leap in.
Okay, as far as work for female technicians, we encourage it. We look for female technicians here. Quite frankly, in audio, in some parts we need female technicians because we need females to mic up some of the delegates, because we have rooms that are separated by male and by female in different conferences, and we actually need female lighting technicians, audio technicians, and video technicians. As far as female technicians in Saudi is concerned, I personally don't have a lot of experience in Saudi, and it's a very new market, so I'm not sure what it is like there. But here in Dubai, no, there's not really much difference between male and female anymore. And I was very, very surprised, pleasantly, in working here. I mean, occasionally I keep getting referred to as girl, but yeah, I'm living with it.
Kevin, if I could jump in there just on the, I know if I think back to our project, I know in Saudi, some of the female crew members that were more in like a site management sort of positions and stuff like that, they had a few challenges, but with the male up and down, below and above them, mostly from subordinates, like below them, where they wouldn't listen to them. But yeah, some of the departments they managed to break through that barrier, and others didn't. So, but I know they did find it challenging.
Okay, so look, we're just over our limit, and I know Sharif sent me a note saying he has another meeting. So Sharif, if you could just wrap it up, and as I said, if you could focus on things that are relevant from a SATIA stroke TPSA perspective. The issue of standards, training, certification, and of course, how do people access work related to those three?
Thanks, Kevin. So I'd like to start and echo what Belinda has said with regards to females in the industry in the Middle East. Obviously, it is far more cosmopolitan in the UAE. The minute you hit Bahrain and Qatar and Saudi Arabia, yes, you can work there. You just got to be mindful and respectful of the religion and the culture in the way you dress. And like Kurt said, you can't, and Clinton said, you can't just zap your finger and speak the way you want to. As long as you're doing all of that, it's irrelevant. And in fact, you'll find that a lot of women in Saudi Arabia are taking the lead in many of the events that are taking place there. So yes, it is very much encouraged. With regards to this group around the table, we are fortunate, especially with the likes of Kurt, Belinda, and Clinton, that are stalwarts and industry leaders that have taken South Africans and brought us and taken us out of South Africa into the Middle East. So they are definitely our go-to people that can assist us and guide us to getting us into, as well as trade for that matter, into the Middle East. But your best way forward and your best foot forward is, as it always has been, and let's just put SATIA and TPSA aside just for that moment, is to educate yourself in every aspect, whether it be contract or what you're going to do with your per diems and your flights and your accommodation, doing your research on the company you're going to work for before you go. This is all key factors that you need to take into consideration before you do anything. Likewise, if you are a sound engineer, lighting engineer, or project manager, do the relevant courses. I mean, over and above becoming a person that can drive a forklift truck and a cherry picker and what have you, if you want to go into the world that we are in, your professionalism now needs to come forward. And this is why standards are of paramount importance. And being a member of a professional body where I now bring SATIA into the picture and the TPSA is going to help you. If you're a member of the TPSA, we can guide you, we are there for you, and we can push you forth. Under TPSA and SATIA, you can now become professionally designated, which that document alone will guarantee you an up in your fee, never mind you getting the job. And this is factual. It's so much so it worked for me because I worked directly for a defense company, not for an external. And based on my credentials is the position I got, which like Belinda said in the beginning, or was it Kurt, the terminology is different. I regard myself as a production manager. They don't call it production manager, they call it an operations manager. hey, you know, okay, cool, I'm an operations manager. So much so, I was fortunate because of my credentials to run a festival for 18 days that saw 25,000 people a day as the full-on production manager. So all those credentials will assist you. Likewise, your experience, yes, but without the credentials, you are lost. And I encourage each and everyone that wants to work in the Middle East is to reach out to your professional body, which is the TPSA, and we will guide you through that, because there are many institutions that you can turn to, as in Sound, the Academy of Sound Engineering. There are various rigging institutions. There are various event safety institutions. Educate yourself, be accredited, become professionally designated, and you will not go wrong in the Middle East, especially via the leadership of Kurt, Belinda, and Clinton, and Natasha, because Clinton's wife has gone leaps and bounds into the industry in the Middle East. Thank you.
Okay. Sharif, I know that you have the meeting and you need to go. Is that Trey coming in?
Yes, I just wanted to add on the medical insurance part. When I left for Europe, I used a certain, it is South African based. It's called Alliance Insurance. They provide health insurance which you can buy once off and covers you for a certain period of time wherever you're traveling. It also includes your luggage insurance and everything else, because I also lost my luggage. It was delayed actually when I was in Europe, so they paid a certain amount for me just to compensate for that period. So it's actually something good to look into. For everyone else who might need information, they must feel free to reach out to me. It covers you whichever country you go into or whichever continent you go to, and you can just do it like it's 5 minutes. You can buy it online and then it's very, very much legit. So I use that one, and it also is very, very helpful, judging from my own experience. So it can be something that you can look into if you are traveling on your own. They don't need to know if you are buying the ticket or not. So it's something that one needs to have on the side for themselves, and it's also available. You choose different packages depending on how much you want to be covered for and stuff, just in case the gig you are going to do, they're not providing health insurance or travel insurance. You can purchase that one for yourself online.
Very good. Belinda?
Just with regards to medical insurance here, if we are taking you on for 6 months or 7 months or even a project-specific role, we will do your visa and do medical insurance. It's mandatory in the UAE to have medical insurance, and this is generally should be paid by the company that is recruiting you. That's all I've got to add. I'm sorry, guys, I need to go. I am late for another meeting.
That's fine. Thanks to everybody. I know that we've run over time, but I do appreciate all of the inputs. So thank you very much to everybody that's been able to share their questions with us. If you have any other information that you'd like, you're welcome to drop me an email, and I will forward it to the relevant person and do everything that I can to ensure that your questions are answered. So thank you very much. Appreciate the time that you spent with us. Thank you.
Thank you.